Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
And welcome to the GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is the lovely, the magnificent, the one, the only...
80s Music Girl.
Yay! 80s Music Girl. So glad you could join us once again for tonight's harrowing adventure in The Incredible Hulk, Season 4, Episode 10, Wax Museum. First aired February 13th, 1981. Directed by Dick Harwood. Written by Kenneth Johnson and Carol Baxter. Who we have to take a moment and call out Carol Baxter because, of course, Carol Baxter is no lightweight to our group here. Carol Baxter has previously been in Haunted in 1979. She played Renee Stevens, the woman with multiple personalities disorder, who underwent Hulk therapy and was miraculously cured.
Amazing.
Yes, she also played Dr. Charlene McGowan in Prometheus Part 2 just recently. And, of course, here she is the writer on our show, which is great. She is a well-known writer. We went over this before in earlier episodes, but might as well call it out again. She was a major force writing on She-Ra, Princess of Power.
Yeah.
And did Battlestar Galactica, Sheriff Lobo. She's all over the place, but she is a talented writer, and we are very glad, and actress, and we are very glad to have her writing this episode about going crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is, it's an interesting thing. This episode, the next episode, you really do. I mean, obviously the Hulk serves his purpose, but these are not Hulk-centric episodes. These are episodes about the characters in the story. They had a story before the Hulk showed up. They're going to have a story after the Hulk leaves. And it's just interesting to see how a Hulk affects their situation.
This is true.
David Beckwith takes a job at the Gamble Wax Museum, assisting a woman suffering from hallucinations ever since her father died in a fire. Okay. Of course, our Lee Gamble is played by Christine Belford. I want to say she actually had another Incredible Hulk credit to her name too. Let me just double check that. She of course is in line. Oh, that was actually one of the. Yeah, she was actually. Oh, she was Linda Callahan in Wildfire. So she was the young woman who seduced David out in the in the oil fields. She also was in several episodes of Insight, which is one of my favorite shows as a young Catholic boy growing up. Produced by the Paulus Fathers, and they did sort of little morality plays from a hip eccentric Vatican II kind of vibe. So it was very, very formative in my very progressive Catholicism that I follow to this day.
Awesome.
Yes.
I've seen her in other stuff. I think she played a baddie in something, and I can't remember if it was like a Dallas thing or a Dynasty thing.
Yeah, she was in Dynasty. She was Susan Farragut in Dynasty. There was a TV show in 1984 called Empire, where she played Jackie Willow. I don't remember it, but I'm sure it was great.
Me neither.
Not the current Empire. She was in a couple episodes of The Greatest American Hero back in the day, and that was actually her other big role was she was Evelyn Stratton in Silver Spoons. She was Ricky Schroeder's mom, I believe.
Oh,
If I'm not
okay.
mistaken, yes. So she was his mom, and who sort of left him with his dad after, you know,
Okay.
yes,
So she's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, she is. She's a great little actress, and she does a great job here. Although actually, I gotta say, the person who steals this episode for me is Max Showalter, who plays Walter Gamble. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, man, did you see the heel turn coming with this guy?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Well, I only because there really couldn't have been a better explanation, but just because I say that doesn't mean that I didn't marvel at his ability to snow his niece.
Oh yeah,
He was just so sincere and so beloved.
Yeah.
Oh, it's your health. You're going to be fine. We've gone through so much together. Oh, by the way, we're tanking and going under. Here, sign these papers. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
But, the turning point, we will get on to that. But yeah, so I wasn't really sure. So I made a note to see, sociopath, question mark.
Yes. Well, because he's always smiling. Yeah. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah. The eyes tell it all.
Oh, yeah.
The eyes tell it.
So David, once again, gets himself a job, Doesn't pay much, but it gives him free room and board, which,
right.
Man, I tell you, I've never, I mean, I guess it's a thing, well, at least it was a thing in TV, that you would get a job that included a place to live.
Yeah.
But, as I think back, they had that that was all over the place when I was a young man. The idea that you could, in fact, Steve Martin's The Jerk. That's part of his pay package in The Jerk when he gets his first job with what's his name?
It's been a while.
Jackie Mason. Jackie Mason is the gas station owner who hires him, and the job includes that he gets a cot in the back of the gas station where he can sleep. So I've often wondered if this was a real thing, but it at least was a ubiquitous thing in dramatized stories. Okay, so he gets his room in the wax museum, and we see that our Lee Gamble, played by Christine Belford, is taking over her father's wax museum shortly after her father died tragically in a fire.
Yes.
And we see that she had to go away for a bit because she had a touch of the crazy. Although, as the story unfolds, we see that the crazy was kind of induced.
Yes.
Yes, and
interesting twist.
Yes, well, it is very interesting because she keeps on, and this is actually an interesting thing because this actually goes back to, we had this episode not too long ago where David meets a psychic, and she keeps on taking these pills, and this idea that you have this bottle of pills and you take one. With no real regard to dosage or why.
None whatsoever.
Yes, and it makes me wonder if that was again one of these things. Was that a thing?
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder because at some point she was just really kind of doubling up on these suckers, and thinking, did you actually read the label?
Well, as it turns out, no, she wasn't reading the label. They didn't have any label on them, which was the whole thing. She had these little pill bottles given to her by her uncle.
Yeah.
He says, take one and pass it on,
Exactly. Woke up
And
and he got him.
and immediately David starts to get suspicious.
Oh yeah, well, he's a trained doctor. That's
Yes. This is something we've seen before with David. He recognizes that people are taking medicines, and he knows that it's not the medicine they think it is. That
right.
goes all the way back to our first, the first the first story after the pilot, which was Death in the Family, where he notices that the lead actress in that is not getting the medicine she thinks she's getting, because he knows
Right.
what color that medicine should be, and the medicine they're giving her isn't that color. So
Right.
so here he does. He takes and I thought this was very interesting because I did not even know that was a thing at the time, but I guess it makes sense it would be. Is that David takes one of her pills
Mhm.
and goes down to a clinic where they test your drugs for you.
Yeah, no questions asked. I thought that was quite unique as well.
Yeah, well, see, I know that exists because I know that during when I was a young man in the '90s, they
Mhm.
I knew that if you went to clubs, they'd often have the safety dance people there, and they would test your drugs for you to let you know if
Mhm.
this was not something you should be taking. Make sure it was
Right.
what you thought it was. And I did
Yeah.
not realize that this was a service that had existed since the '80s, but nice to know it is.
Neat. Yeah. Yeah.
And they give him his little call number so that he can call back and find out what it is.
Mhm.
And when he
Yeah.
does, he finds out that she's been taking a low dose of LSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 90%
Definitely.
sugar, and 10% LSD. Which makes you wonder why the guy starts off with the 90% sugar. Because there
Yeah.
seems like a
Yeah.
completely meaningless point in that. Where the guy says, well,
Yeah.
yeah, your pills, those were just 90% sugar. So what about
Yeah.
10% LSD?
Yeah. It's
Um,
kind of a placebo, but not really.
yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like he says 90% sugar, and you're immediately thinking it's some kind of placebo, and then it's like, no, 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 no. He kind of buried the
No.
lead on that, is what you would say.
Yeah.
Um, but
I like how he threw that story in. Remember
oh
that guy that the government was testing on and he didn't know about it,
yeah,
supposedly? Yeah, well, he went bananas.
yeah, the soldier who was yeah. And what I loved best about that story is that David just like, yeah, totally, I know that story.
Yeah, who doesn't? Hey,
Yeah,
come on, guy.
yeah, man. Well, it's it was a friend of his friend told him that, and that's how those stories go. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, but we have this scene. We have our first Hulk out when,
Yes.
well, first off, we have this item where Lee decides she's going to immortalize David in wax.
Where the hell
And,
did that come from?
yeah,
I was like, what, lady? You known him for what? A day?
yeah, well, it's David has that effect on women. We know this.
Yeah, he does.
Women
I
do
have to.
fall for David Banner.
Uh,
He's a
yeah.
handsome. Bill Bixby is a not unattractive young man, and well spoken and helpful, and what's not to love,
Oh,
and
I.
yeah, but of course and she makes this very nice model of his face, which is actually super detailed, and it was kind of one of these things in this episode where you would see these highly detailed wax figures, and then but most of them were like really clearly just thrown together wax mannequins that
Hmm.
were mass produced for the show.
Hmm.
There was a real inconsistency there, and this was kind of weird to me too because you see the David Banner face
Yes.
on like I don't know, it was supposed to be a Jack the Ripper guy or something, or maybe a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but they
Yeah.
have him in this very Victorian clothing. And
Uh-huh.
then David says, well, here, if you're going to use my face, because he doesn't want his face out there, obviously,
No.
maybe you can help me relive, take on my fantasy. And then they next show it, and the head is now has a beard and an eye patch, and he's a pirate.
Hmm.
Except I don't know
Yes.
that wax head no longer looked anything like David Banner.
No, and you know why?
Why?
This is my theory because
Okay.
one of those scenes happened before with the guy. I can't remember what he was dressed up as, but you can clearly see him moving. He's trying to be still, but it's actually a person.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happened, with David's wax figure. Wink, wink.
Yes.
It was actually him. Just being really super still.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is the pirate, and that's why the pirate doesn't look anything like him, because it's a really bad wax figure.
Yes. Well, like I said,
just my theory.
I think
for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think there may be some truth to that. Well, I know we also get a scene that I believe we got a scene in this where, the actual wax figure actually does start to move because it is because she's having her hallucination when we first get that. It's one of the Harley Quinns. I'm not quite sure. I mean, like I say, I was not aware wax museums were that big of a business in the 1980s. Where not only do you have unscrupulous businessmen trying to bid it out, but that it doesn't matter how much damage and trouble you go through, you can open up and people are going to be lined up around the blocks to see the wax museum.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't it? There's still that big one in L.A., isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I mean, actually, one second. Sorry. A little bit of a spring cold going through my house right now. Well, no, actually, I mean, like now, Madame Tussauds is actually a big franchise, and you do have, you have the one in Niagara Falls, you have the one in Times Square. You do have a lot of these wax museums. You do have a number of wax museums out there.
Right.
Usually in big tourist hubs, though, like Times Square or Hollywood, California, or Niagara Falls. I don't know where this place is, but it did not seem... I mean, it was apparently a place where they did have a tourist season, but it was sort of,
Well, an awful lot of graffiti, I know that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it probably wasn't in a very good neighborhood.
What are you going to do?
I don't know.
Yes. Anyway, so we have our first Hulk out when Lee is working late in the workshop where she's making new wax figures, and all of a sudden the big vat of boiling wax, the valve breaks and she can't turn it off, and she calls for David. He comes in, but there's wax on the floor and it's boiling wax, and he falls down and slips, and the hot wax falls all over his body. It burns him, and we have our first Hulk out, which is actually pretty cool. Yeah, he picks up the vat and he throws it. He smashes through a brick wall, which did look a little like a rubber wall, but we'll go along with it.
Sure.
Yeah, well, as I always say, one of the great things about The Incredible Hulk is it really allowed them to amortize the Universal Studios backlot,
Yes.
Where you have a lot of these built up cities that, you just sort of run through and smash through, and you can throw it back up the next day for the next show.
Yep.
But he tears the place apart. He runs off past the newsstand guy, Ruben, who has a bit of a freak out because he sees the Hulk, and we get a nice scene where see an old lady at a very early model, and I honestly, that ATM, that 24-hour bank teller. That was one of the weirdest looking ATMs. Now, I remember early ATMs. They didn't look anything like that.
No, yeah. I remember using one in, was it Germany? I think it was a credit union. I used one somewhere, and it was around about that time.
Yes.
And I remember them not being able to connect to your bank account in real time. And I actually remember going in the red because I withdrew too much money out of my account, thinking that I had this much, and so
that's
that was a thing. You could actually do that. You
could actually bounce your ATM.
Yeah, you could.
Yes. No, but I like that. There's no video screen. It's just random buttons that you push, and
Yeah.
they aren't arranged in any kind of practical manner like a keypad. It's just
Yeah.
it was very much a stock computer system that they kind of threw up onto the wall to be an ATM.
Yeah. Why would Hulk want to take money out of a bank account? Was he just sitting there kind of dumbfounded,
Well,
just
yeah, well,
pressing
'cause
buttons?
there's the woman talking to him, the woman robot
Yeah.
talking to him, and he's pushing buttons, and then, which apparently just pushing random keys really messes up the computer. This was not a
Yeah, they don't like that.
well-designed computer. Uh,
No, it isn't.
but this is one of these things that I think is kind of interesting here, is that at this point in history, ATMs are such a new technology
Yes.
that anyone looking at this isn't necessarily going to think that's a weird, crazy look. Like the way you and I look at that, we go, "That's not
Yeah.
an ATM."
Yeah.
But at the time this was coming out, people didn't have ATMs in their towns in a lot of the country.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was a very new thing. Even just to the fact that it's not called an ATM, it's called a 24-hour electronic teller.
Yeah.
Which is actually that's actually an item in Fahrenheit 451. That's where one of the earliest ideas of an ATM are from is Fahrenheit 451, where when the guy's on the run, he was thinking all the banks will be closed, but I can always use the 24-hour robot teller.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's in there, but and that's sort of what you're seeing here is this 24-hour robot teller, not a well-designed teller, and it does, especially because as soon as you hit it, it just starts shooting out money. So obviously,
Yes.
somebody, some company really cut corners on that contract.
I think they did.
Yes. Meanwhile, after David comes down, and he sneaks back into his apartment and gets himself dressed again. We do find that he sees that the woman is really off edge because she is just saw a Hulk, but she actually is so used to having hallucinations that she doesn't necessarily believe she saw a Hulk. She thinks she just hallucinated all this stuff, and and of course that's when David finds out about the pills. And he does confront, and of course at this time also as our little B plot, we do have Jack McGee coming in to town after the
Jack's back.
Jack's back, yeah. Well, he's not in next episode, but they let Jack Colvin direct next episode, so.
Yeah.
But here he gets to come in, and he actually does have a nice little bit to do, because he does get to speak with he does talk to he does talk to Lee in the Wax Museum. And Lee's like, I didn't see anything, nothing that wasn't real, which is a very interesting thing, because here you have this person basically trying to hold on to her sanity and saying, that didn't happen, it wasn't real. And here's Jack McGee saying, oh, no, the Hulk is very real, you did see the Hulk. A bit of a conflict there. And then after Jack walks out, and of course he does almost sees Banner, but Banner just does the freeze behind some wax dummies to appear like a wax dummy.
Close my eyes, you can't see me.
Exactly. And he goes to talk to Walter, or was it Walter or Uncle? Yeah, Walter. Yeah. Walter Gamble goes to talk to Walter, who's definitely playing up about how crazy his niece is, because at this point it has been revealed that yes, he's been drugging her, And I mean, well, it hasn't been revealed that he has. We just know that she's been taking LSD.
Mm-hmm.
And it would the only reasonable suspect is Uncle Walter.
Yeah.
And then she is, she's going through her because she keeps on. She takes a couple more tablets of LSD, and then David
Yeah.
comes in to talk to her, and he's like, "Hey, Lee," and everything's all
Yeah.
slowed down and goes to blacklight.
Mm-hmm.
And then Walter comes in.
The color.
Yes, whacks David on the back of the head, which is of course the
Yeah.
Hulk's one weakness,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and then starts to, is trying to get his niece to sign the papers so that basically they can cash out and put this nonsense behind them.
Yes.
Which is not an unreasonable thing, really.
No, it isn't.
No, really.
She's pretty stubborn.
Yeah.
She's pretty stubborn.
It's like, but it was my father's dream. It's like, really,
Yeah.
that was his dream. But as it plays out, we do get the big reveal that yes, Walter has been drugging Lee, has been manipulating Lee this whole time, and is actually a pretty cruel and monstrous man.
Yeah.
Very much is of this, you should love me as your father because I'm the better father than your actual father.
Yes.
Oh,
and by the way, I hated your father, so.
Oh yeah. Well, but then you realize that the whole reason he hated her father was because it was professional jealousy because he was a genius at making wax figures.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and just as a point, Jack McGee knows that the Hulk was there because he does see her. She is making a Hulk statue, which is pretty awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good job. The rest of them look crap, but that one actually looks, legit.
Yeah. Well, they do have to every so often invest in these things. Well, you know what? Well, the reason why it is because they couldn't buy a Hulk off the rack.
Yeah, well.
So all the other heads they could just buy, standard head models. But they actually had to commission someone to make a wax Hulk, so it actually looked really good. Anyway, the uncle starts setting the museum afire, and again, this weird, admits, to everything he's done, but it's sort of this weird thing to me. It's like, why is this company willing to pay for a burnt out wax museum? You know what I mean? The as yet unseen, wax museum, the big corporate wax museum conglomerate. It doesn't matter how damaged this place is; they want to buy it.
Yeah.
But
hey, it's big business in wax figures. What can I say?
Yeah, well, apparently so. Jack McGee comes in because he sees the fire, and then Walter locks Jack McGee in the room with Lee, and of course David is already unconscious, and then he catches fire, turns into a Hulk. Jack and Lee are both passed out, and then he smashes everything down. Gets Jack and Lee out of the burning room, but leaves them in the hallway.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that one out. This wall is just solid. It's not, the fire's not going to go through this wall.
Honestly,
at all.
It wasn't the. Yeah, I mean, there was a little. We have to get to the next scene kind of thing there, because he does have to. Does have to beat up Uncle Walter. And then he does, and then hooray, Hulk escapes. Hopefully David put the check in his pocket before then, so he does have his check, so he gets his money for the next 2 weeks.
Right. Right. Not that he needs it.
Yes, but then we cut to after the aftermath, where we get the wrap up, where apparently they have enough money to hire workmen now to fix up the place, and makes you wonder how much the uncle was embezzling out of this thing, because all of a sudden he's gone and suddenly her books are actually looking good, and she can actually afford to pay people to fix up the place and get everything moving nicely forward. And Jack McGee's in the office with her. They're trying to get her to admit to the Hulk, and she says, "Hey, I don't know, man. I was on a lot of drugs when that happened.
Yeah.
I don't remember this John Doe guy. Yeah, there was a guy here. I couldn't tell you anything about him because I was stoned out of my gourd the whole time because my uncle was drugging me." Which makes you wonder if that's actually true or if she's just covering for David.
This is true.
Because
you never know.
Yeah, because she knows David is the Hulk. She Because she was on LSD at the time, but she still was there. She saw it. She knows what was going on. But anyway.
Right.
But then Lee gives Jack a lifetime pass to the Wax Museum. Cue the Lonely Man theme, and David hitchhiking to his next adventure. So what were your final thoughts on tonight's episode, 80s Music Girl?
Well, I really was intrigued by this, and I didn't take a whole lot of notes on it, mainly because, once again, I was actually enthralled in the storyline, and I thought, that was very creative how they came up with that. The uncle, the gentleman that plays the uncle, I really like him as an actor. Mm-hmm. He kind of reminds me of if you had a circus, he would be the ringmaster, because he has that kind of voice. Like he could have been a game show host or, an announcer of some kind, but he had a very interesting persona about him, just in general. And then you throw, his character into the mix, and you really do believe him that he's very sincerely has his niece's welfare at hand. And so you think maybe he's a sociopath. He really wants her to sell the place so she can be better off, getting well and forgetting the whole incident. And then you see what transpires afterward. Then you upgrade him to psychopath, because he's willing to kill to get whatever he wants.
Do you know who that actor reminds me of?
Who?
Ray Wise.
Really?
Yeah. Have you ever saw Ray Wise as the devil in Reaper?
Yes.
And there's just something about Max Showalter's character. It's just, the whole time I'm watching, I'm thinking, where have I seen it? And I'm realizing that it's triggering my memory of Ray Wise's devil character. So it's that same kind of nice guy who is actually the epitome of evil. And this guy really goes over as evil.
The only thing that's missing is the sense of humor. Because Ray Wise brought that, sarcastic wit, as you would expect the devil to have anyway. If he did have a sense of humor, it'd be like, oh, yeah.
Yes, well...
Yeah. That's a good call on that. I like that.
Yeah, but this was a really great... this is again one of these things where, as a Hulk episode, the Hulk doesn't accomplish that, doesn't do much, but just as a show episode, it's a great story. It's a great little bit of anthology tale on this road trip adventure that David Banner is on.
Right. And this is where the electronic teller comes in, because now we know where David gets all his money from.
Well, actually, yeah. Honestly, if you have a Hulk, the only problem is he could only get it when he's the Hulk, and the Hulk, you'd have to have the Hulk know enough to pick up the money. Yeah. That's the problem there.
Darn it, I thought I had it there.
Yeah, Actually, I think if the Hulk was actually knocking over ATMs, there would be a lot more interest in catching the Hulk. You know?
Well, yeah, but I was mainly referring to the Swiss bank account. So.
Oh yeah. Well, no. Well, yeah.
You
Well,
never got it.
now he'll be able to get this money so much easier.
See, that's what they
Now they
introduced.
have
It's
now that they have
kinda dumb.
ATMs. Although we also know that ATMs are still rare and they're hard to,
Yes.
they're hard to utilize, And also, I don't think you can actually get your money out of an ATM with a Swiss bank account. Generally speaking, Swiss
Plus,
bank accounts, you really have to.
it was a stab in the dark.
Yeah,
No pun intended.
that's okay. Okay, so 80s Music Girl, if you would like to talk to you about the Incredible Hulk or 80s music or anything at all that interests you or them, how can they find you?
I am at 80s Music Girl on Twitter and 80s Music Girl on Facebook and 80s Music Girl on Instagram.
Awesome. And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our Maz and Paz once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. And of course, follow me on Twitter as I do live tweet. The Incredible Hulk, 7 o'clock on Saturdays. I actually was able to do it last week. It was great. It was so much fun.
It was.
Bring me the head of the Hulk. It was great. And everyone agreed with me that yes, LaFront did look like a full-sized Peter Dinklage. Yes, but follow me on the Twitters at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Thank you for hulking out with us once again, ladies and gentlemen. Please hulk out with us again. Good night.
Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.